guys, check it out. Today is a really cool video that like 3 people are gonna care about. I've got a classic Mini and a newer Mini, and we're gonna see which one is better. This is a 1993 classic Mini. It's the Mr. Bean car. They built this from 1959 all the way up to 2000. Now this is a 2010 Mini, which is the second generation of the new era of Mini. You see, the classic one died after 40 years of production, and then BMW reintroduced them at the end of 2000, and this is the second generation of that BMW era. Now this classic Mini debuted in the late 1950s as a response to the fuel shortage caused by the Suez Crisis in 1956. And it was a super revolutionary design because Sir Alec Izagonis, the chief designer, took the wheels, pushed them way to the corner to maximize interior space, and then took the engine, which usually goes like this, and mounted it sideways, making the car front-wheel drive. Here we are in the classic Mini. Let's get to driving it. So key here, ignition on the right side of the steering wheel. First crank, and that's because this, of course, has fuel injection. Listen to that. What a noise. So this is a A-series engine, is what they call it. It's basically the same engine you'd find back in 59, except this is, once again, a 93. But listen to that noise. Why can't manufacturers make a 4-cylinder engine sound good in 2020? Manual transmission, of course, shifting with my left hand. First gear. You know what? It's remarkably simple. Like some classic cars you really gotta think about. This Mini, especially with fuel injection, you just get in it and drive it. Now obviously the new Mini has grown quite a lot, but the formula is still pretty much the same. The wheels are pushed to the corners, and then the engine is still mounted sideways. Now that was super special way back in 1959, but today pretty much every compact car uses that same formula. Now starting up the new Mini is a pretty normal procedure, except for the weird key. Fuel injected, of course. This one's direct injected. Not quite as much drama. Not a bad sounding engine, it just doesn't have the same pops or burbles or just pure excitement as that old one. And this one also has an aftermarket back box, a John Cooper Works one, so it is a little louder than stock, but you know, not quite the same experience. Now a lot of the classic Mini people do kind of hate on these newer BMW Minis as being not as raw, not as small. I'm actually not in that group. I love these BMW era Minis, especially the second gen called the R56. Of course, granted not very reliable, but neither was the old one. It's just so fun though. I mean, it's fun in different ways. It's not quite, you know, as small, as nimble, but it's really quick. The steering is still really good, and the brakes are so much better than the old one. I mean, this is a real car you can use every day. Now this Mini, believe it or not, was built in 1993, but it looks pretty much the same as it did in 83, and 73, and 1963 if we're being honest. The design didn't change for pretty much 40 years, but a lot of the stuff on the inside did. And we're gonna go over all the really cool features, starting with how you get into it. The Mini uses an absolutely tiny, tiny key for the door, but simply put the key in the door like that, turn it toward the button, and then it's got a very satisfying feeling when you go to finally unlatch the door. Listen to that sound, and the door close. Ooh, it's pretty good actually. It's like an old school refrigerator. Now the new Mini uses this UFO pie chart thing as a key. I don't understand why it looks like this, but simply push the unlock button, grab the door handle, and open it up. Now this is of course a frameless door, so the feeling not quite as good as the old one. Now stepping into the classic Mini, the first thing you notice is that Sir Alec Izagonis was kind of a genius. Well, a major genius, because even though the exterior dimensions of this car are about the same of that of like a medium walrus, I actually fit, and I am 6 foot 1 inch tall. Check this out. I still have a little bit of headroom to spare, pretty decent legroom. The steering wheel isn't poking me in the tummy. Like, this is not an uncomfortable place to be. Oh, and one more thing, this Mini is right-hand drive. You could get them in left-hand drive depending on where you lived in the world, but this car was born in the UK, then shipped to Japan where it spent most of its life, and is now here in the USA, so it's kind of a world traveler. Now, what is a classic Mini like to drive? Well, to put it short, it is the single best car I have ever driven on-road, ever. I have more fun in this worn-out, kind of clapped-out classic Mini than any other car. That includes McLarens, Porsches. This is more fun. I don't care what you drive. It rattles, it squeaks, it's bumpy butts on the road. It's incredible. Now, we've got a little bit of a merge here. Let me give it some beans. Here we go. Oh, listen to that engine note. In a second. Woohoo! 0 to 60 at a mile above sea level, I don't know. Maybe 9.5 seconds, but it doesn't matter. It really doesn't, because you get this thing around any turn, be it in the city, be it in the mountains, be it on the highway, and that's when it really comes to life. Now in the new Mini, well, space is just cavernous compared to the old one. The old one isn't bad. The new one is proper gem sized, if you know what I mean. I mean, if I put the seat all the way back, I can't comfortably use the pedals or the steering wheel. That's how much room there is in the driver's seat. It's by no means a large car compared to like any other modern day car, but even still, it's very, very spacious. All right, merging onto the highway in the newer Mini. Holy cow. Yep, that is so much quicker. This is probably up here like a mid 6 or 7 second car versus 9.5. And it pulls better too at speed. You know, that turbo kicks in, you get that whoosh. Whoa! Still puts a big smile on your face. Now, safety is a big concern, of course. This is a much safer car. It's got like 7 airbags versus 0 in the old Mini. And, you know, I wouldn't want to get hit by any of these cars, but if we did, we'd probably be okay, where if you got hit by that F-150 in the classic Mini, well, that would just be your coffin, if we're being honest. Now, we often remember these old Minis for being super quirky and just crazy weird on the interior, but by 1993, the interiors kind of became pretty normal. Like, it's got a normal dashboard, the gauges are in front of the steering wheel, they're not in the center, it's got plastic everywhere, it's just kind of like a normal 90s car. Well, okay, they did do some pretty weird stuff. One of the weirdest things about this Mini is the storage situation, because, check this out, I've got a big cubby here, I've got this little glove box here, and I've got a big glove box down here, except this isn't a glove box. They molded a handle for a glove box. You can see where the glove box might have lived, but they never cut the hole. How berserk is that? The next weird thing is, well, the steering wheel position. It's kind of like, I've heard it described as a London bus, because the steering wheel sticks very upright and is not adjustable. It's actually not too bad on this later 93 car, but it still is like, it's in a kind of an odd position. I'd probably prefer it to be more vertical, if you know what I mean, but it is what it is. You just kind of have to get used to it. So the climate controls in this Mini are kind of all over the place. First of all, this is a Japanese spec Mini, which means it has air conditioning. I've got a switch here for the temperature, and I've got another dial here for the blower. But the heater is in a completely different place. This knob right here is how I adjust the heat that comes into the Mini from the engine, so I can pull out for more heat, push in for less heat. But the fan control for the heater is actually on the other side of the dashboard. And then lastly, this is the area for the airflow. So I've got screen, I've got car, I've got off, and I've got an on and off switch, and I have no idea what that does. I really do like the vents on the right and the left side of the dashboard here. They're circular. You can aim them wherever you want, and then you turn the little knob on the inside to allow air to flow or close it off. Here in the door panel, you do notice some pretty cool things. Now, the actual door handle on the interior is this crazy lever. You just pull back and that unlatches the door. Here is the window winder mechanism. It actually works backwards compared to every other car with manual windows. So you turn it clockwise to put the window down, and you turn it counterclockwise to roll the window up. You've got a big handle here to close the door, and then of course your door lock over here. Now the funny thing about these components, these look like some horrible Pep Boys aftermarket thing. They're drilled out and they just look very fast and furious, but believe it or not, I'm quite sure they are original to this car, and even the window winder, take a look at this, it has the Mini Cooper logo there. The steering wheel on this car is, it's really cool. It's a Nardi wheel. It's signed by Nardi here on one of the spokes. It's leather wrapped. It's 3-spoked, very sporty. Quite sure it's original to the car. It's got a center cap that's got this kind of vintage font. It says the British Motor Corporation Ltd, and it's got a button in the middle. That button does absolutely nothing. It doesn't operate the horn. It doesn't do anything. Actually, the horn button is right here on the stock. Because why not? Here's the light control for the Classic Mini. It's actually a toggle, and for some reason to turn the lights on, you push it down to turn the lights off. You go ahead and bring it back up. And then these controls here, you got a button here for your hazards, one for your fog lights, one for the rear defrost, and this button is just to make sure that the brake warning light works. That's all it's there for. This little kind of nub, by the way, this is where the choke would be in a carbureted car, but they just decided to get rid of the choke and give you like a little plastic nub. One kind of interesting thing about the Mini is there's no division between where the area for the driver's feet and the passenger's feet live. It's all just kind of one big blobby space. And the pedals, they're tiny. I've got size 12 feet. You do have to be a little bit careful on what you're reaching for. And look at this, I need new pads for both the brake and the throttle. The steering is so direct. This is the most direct steering I have felt in any car ever. It is like, it's non-power assisted, but on 12-inch wheels, it just immediately, like it doesn't understeer, doesn't oversteer. You turn the wheel, flick it into any corner at any speed. Are you ready? Are you ready? You fall off the seats pretty quickly, but it just grips. It is a little bit alarming to drive on the highway, I will give you that, because it's, you know, it's a shoebox. Above 65, 70, the steering is a little bit twitchy if you're not ready for it, so you gotta kind of keep your eye on the ball. But even at 70 miles an hour, you can take any turn at any speed, and it just sticks. It's incredible. Now the new Mini is very throwback, but of course it's not throwback to the 93 car, it's like a throwback to the very desirable early 60s cars. Talking about the center mounted speedometer is huge, it's massive, it's just like it was back on like a 62 Cooper, for example. But there's all sorts of retro touches as well, so these air vents are probably the biggest similarity between the new car and the old car, and there's some kind of cutesy things that they're working on here and there. The Classic Mini has a normal key and a normal ignition. The new Mini's got this UFO that you put into its landing strip there, and then you still have to push a button, believe it or not, to start the engine. But if I don't have the key on me and I just go to like push the button to start the engine, nothing happens. In this car I actually have to insert it before I can start it. Both of these cars have pretty crazy climate controls. The old one is just thrown about the cabin. The new one is designed to look like the Mini logo, but it's totally weird. You've got your fan control here on the left and this weird dial thing like a Rolls Royce. Then you've got the temperature control on the right, a button for AC, and then this center dial actually distributes the air. Now just like the old Mini, the new Mini has a pretty crazy glove box setup. I do have a very large traditional mounted glove box, but there's a secret glove box, which Mini owners get upset when I talk about because you're not supposed to know about it, but here, check it out. Whoa, the actual interior trim folds back and displays another secret little cubby. The other nice thing is that these modern Minis can be had with manual transmissions, just like the old one. The old one is a 4-speed, this one's a 6-speed, much shorter throws, easy clutch to use, easy clutch to learn on as well. And these cars are just, they get so much hate. from people in the car community and people online, but they're just so great to drive. They stick incredibly well, really nimble. The turbocharged engines, especially on the Cooper S, John Cooper work models, they pull hard. They're just like, they've got this stigma of being kind of unreliable, and yes, the unreliability may be somewhat true, but as a second or a third car to drive on the weekends, oh yeah! God, it pulls so well. Still have fun with. Obviously the front of the Minis are fairly similar in their overall design. They both have round headlights, they both have a somewhat similar grille layout, but this old Mini looks very organic, very purposeful. The new Mini looks like it's just trying too hard to be a lot like the old one. Now you'll notice this on the front of the classic Mini, it says Mini Cooper. Alright, that probably seems pretty normal, but it's actually a little bit interesting because Cooper back in the day was a separate tuning house run by a gentleman named John Cooper. Most Minis were just like Mini 850s, Mini 1000s, and the Mini Cooper was actually a super special model, of course by the 90s. Not quite as special, but even still back in the 90s, having a Mini Cooper was kind of unusual. Having this little badge on the front meant this was the sporty one, something special. Now here in the US, all modern Minis are Coopers. But in Europe, believe it or not, you can still get non-Cooper Minis, like a Mini 1, which is going to be like the entry-level car, and then the Cooper is the performance model on top of that, and then the Cooper S is faster than that, and then the Cooper S John Cooper works is the top dog. Now popping the hood on a classic Mini is kind of a mechanic's nightmare, because by 1993, this Mini had gotten quite complicated. This one is air conditioning, it has fuel injection, and all of this had to fit in the same area that the engineers back in 1959 designed, so it's a nightmare for any kind of access. But there are some hints and tricks under here. So for example, take a look at this. This Mini has these little knobs on the grille, and believe it or not, this is quick access to remove the grille, so you can kind of at least get to the front of the engine. And another interesting thing is, check this out, the radiator is over here on the left side of the car. And if you lived in the UK in the 1960s and were cold in the wintertime, just stand right here next to a Mini because the radiator blows hot air out this wheel well. The old Mini has a 1275 4-cylinder engine, about 60 or 70 horsepower. The new Mini has a 1.6 liter turbocharged 4-cylinder. This one makes about 200 horsepower, so a lot more power. They also give you a massive clamshell hood, so you can actually access the engine. Now there are some pros and cons to this clamshell hood. It's pretty cool how the headlight stays in place and you have these holes that line up with the headlight when you close the hood, but the issue with this is if you're even in a slight accident and need to replace the hood or do any kind of body work, you're never going to get the hood to line up with the headlights properly ever again, because they could barely do it at the factory. Now the other interesting thing is that the gear shift is actually really precise, so 4-speed manual, but it's easy to drive, even with right-hand drive. You know, I thought this would be a huge learning curve, but it really, you get used to it quickly. You know, turn signals are in the same place, wipers are in the same place. It just feels normal. One of the most iconic designs of the classic Mini is the trunk. It's not a hatchback, it's well, it's more of a tailgate, if we're being honest. You turn this little lever and then it folds down, giving you access to a very small trunk, but it's actually, you know, for the size of the car, pretty usable. It does have some weird intrusions. Over here you've got this big hump. That's actually the gas tank, believe it or not. And then over there you've got the fill for the washer nozzle. Also kind of a weird thing to have in the trunk, considering that's the front washer nozzle, so it doesn't have rear. Let me move these tools. It's kind of a necessity in a classic Mini. And you can see in the rear you also have a spare tire, and underneath this cover, a battery. The fuel filler in this Mini is just, it's incredible. It's a real metal, polished metal cap. Pull the lever, it pops open like a 60s Le Mans car. It's just, ooh, listen to that click. Are you ready? Woo! Awesome. Now this one has a locking gas cap, so I've got the little key here. Stick it in, turn it, and then I can pull it out. And that's where all 7 gallons of gasoline goes in. Lock it back up, and ready? You ready? Ooh. The new Mini has this throwback gas cap. It's kind of chintzy and it's just all plastic. At least this, I don't know, it's kind of shiny, and then, you know, you've got your traditional filler there. It's got a little hole in it, classic BMW style, so that you don't have have to let it dangle on your paints, but you know, it's not nearly as nice as a new one. This is a Cooper S with a JCW power kit, so you've got the center mounted exhaust on this new Mini. And now, look at this, a real hatchback. It's admittedly much more usable than the kind of cat flap on the old one, and of course, the seats also fold down super quick and easy. To get into the back seat of this classic Mini, you pull this lever, and the whole front seat actually pivots back, and then you kind of squeeze in. Now this is an interesting phenomenon actually, because when I put the seat down, you actually have quite a bit of knee room. This seat is all the way back, of course. Headroom isn't great, but you can definitely tell that this was designed for small families in the UK. Big storage cubbies on both the left and the right side. I actually wish that I could sacrifice the rear seat legroom for more front seat legroom, because I never carry passengers back here, and if I could make these front seats go back like 3 or 4 more inches, that would be killer. That's exactly what they did on the new Mini actually. Take a look. Oh, getting out is kind of a... Oh, there we go. So you can see in the newer Mini that this seat actually goes all the way back and meets the rear seat, so you can't have legs. But what that means is that tons of front seat leg room, and I can of course just scoot the front seat forward a little bit and have more rear seat leg room as well. So this is a much better back seat. Still have these tiny cubbies just like the old one, but not quite as pronounced. Now price-wise, the classic Minis are kind of expensive actually. We bought that one for $5 grand, put another 4 into it to get it back on the road. It still needs another probably 3 or 4 to be really nice. So those are realistically $14,000, $13,000 cars. This Mini was $5 grand. They depreciate like rocks. They knew it was like 20 something, mid to high 20s, but now you can pick up these, you know, mid 2000s, late early 2010 Minis for $5, $6 grand and have a ton of fun with some safety and cruise control. Well, that was a super fun video to make, an old versus new comparison of 2 black Mini Coopers. Now my favorite, well, I like both of them actually. I actually own both of them, but I'm a little bit partial to the old one just because the driving experience is so raw and so pure, but the new one is still incredibly fun to drive, far safer and much better for, you know, real modern day traffic. Well, as always, this is Tommy with the Fastlane Car. Check out TFL Car and TFL Classics, the YouTube channel you are watching right now, for the latest and greatest in old versus new comparisons.